There are two possibilities for Cyno, and both are equally scary. The first and more unlikely situation is that he is an absolute flop and has absolutely atrocious damage multipliers. To me, this is quite unlikely, as he was the poster child for Sumeru and likely will get the Ayaka treatment. This then leads to a second and more likely situation where he is an absolute beast and does insane amount of aggregate damage that power creeps any other on-field electro main DPS. We discussed him a little bit more in depth in our Should You Pull video already, but basically out of all of the electro characters, only Keqing and Raiden are the true electro on-field damage dealers. And Keqing can be played either cryo, pyro or even quick swap, so the person that Cyno actually competes directly with is an on-field main DPS Raiden Shogun with higher constellations. So the question then becomes will Cyno power creep Raiden Shogun? I've been thinking about this for a couple of days now, and as a person who has spent thousands of dollars for C6 Raiden, and I think the truth is that Cyno likely will be power creeping Raiden Shogun, but in a good way. Let me explain. Cyno essentially is an on-field damage dealer that scales off EM, crit and an offensive main stat like attack, with aggravate being a huge boon and buff to all of electro characters because of its additive bonus and a possible E-spam build for Cyno without ICD. When thinking about it and comparing apple to apple, I do think a C0 Cyno might do much more damage on field than a C2 Raiden Shogun, especially when equally invested. What this means for players is actually a good thing if you think about it, because the power creep isn't to Raiden Shogun herself directly, but the requirements for a C2 or C3 Raiden. Previously, C2 Raiden was a very tempting thing because it allowed players to run an insane electro main DPS that far exceeded the next best, say for example Keqing as a main DPS for electro in terms of damage output. This FOMO for higher constellations is an unhealthy thing for players, and I think having a strong alternative to C2 Raiden lets us broaden our roster and have more fun with the game by playing multiple characters rather than being forced to pull for the same character and go for constellations just because of. Of course, that being said, Cyno as a unit doesn't power creep Raiden as a whole, because what makes Raiden Shogun isn't just her awesome main DPS slashing numbers with big bursts that hits hundreds of thousands of damage, but actually her overall flexibility and utility as a character makes her really one of the top characters in the game right now. She buffs burst damage, gives insane levels of energy recharge, and also offers good off-field damage and even decent on-field damage, all at C0, with a free-to-play weapon like the Catch. But the beckoning of a very strong electro aggravate main DPS does put her a little bit more in check, and perhaps makes her compete even more closely with Fischl now for a supporting electro role, who has gotten much significantly stronger in 3.0 as well. My take, and my honest take is, while Cyno doesn't power creep Raiden Shogun entirely, her place as undisputed top electro in all situations will be challenged, and ultimately, it definitely reduces the requirements for a C2 Raiden Shogun, especially if you have Cyno. I think that this is a good balance for diversity in Genshin, as Raiden was getting quite a little bit overtuned. But for those of you who already have C2 or C3 Raiden, not to feel any stress, because having a character that can do everything all in one kit is far better than having two separate characters. But all I'm saying is a person who perhaps only had C0 Raiden and felt a very strong pressure to get that C2 Raiden for their damage buff now has the option of having two separate characters and achieving a similar result that could be better as well. But ultimately, we'll be testing more of this once he launches next week. So now that you hear my thoughts, what do you think about Cyno? And do you think that he will power creep Raiden Shogun? Let us know in the comments below, and do consider checking out our Should You Pull Cyno video to next, where we go more in depth into analysis of Cyno and possible team comps. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.